I'm delighted to be joined tonight by a lady who's living with PSA and other conditions. I was going to say comorbidities. I expect that's probably true as well. An arthritis patient and volunteer. Welcome in, Angela Laborde. How are you?
Hey Joel, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining me at such short notice. You're an absolute hero. I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
any chance to talk about arthritis, I'm there.
Brilliant. And I probably should have said in the introduction that obviously yesterday was World Arthritis Day, which I've had because of what's been going on in my own world. This is my sole contribution. I'm normally very busy on World Arthritis Day. So thank you for joining me so we can talk about arthritis and I can sleep a little easier knowing that I did at least something to contribute to the awareness.
For sure.
So, for anyone that's, do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are and who you are, and then we'll dive down into the sort of chronic illness side. But yeah, just who is Angela?
Okay, so I'm Angela. I'm 31. I live in Louisiana. For I don't know how many folks are out of the states, but I'm about an hour outside of New Orleans, so hour and a half. So most people know where New Orleans is. So yeah, it's just me living my life. I work in HR and I have a husband and a dog, and I've got a very big extended family. So that's me in a little nutshell. I pre-arthritis, in I guess my pre-diagnosis life, I was super active. I ran half marathons. I was in the marching band as part of the color guard, and when I was in college, I danced for a long time. I was very much a mover and a go person. So I've in the last couple of years had to majorly slow down, which probably in some ways is good. But that's a little bit about me.
I love that, and I like because not that you had to slow down. I realised that wasn't the best time comment, but what I mean is it's really nice to get a flavour of the person. I think because like on a Sunday night we talk about the chronic illness and we focus on the diagnosis journey and the symptoms, and quite rightly we're trying to raise awareness. But I think it's really important to get a flavour of the person behind all of that because we can get a little bit labelled by our long-term health conditions, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms so thank you for sharing all that. Really appreciate it. In terms of like, I know you live with PSA, but was that the start of your journey? Because I know you've got a number of conditions. Do you maybe want to walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I probably started having the symptoms for it long before I knew what it was. But my first diagnosis was actually small fiber neuropathy,
Mhm.
which is interesting because typically you see small fiber showing up as like a secondary condition to autoimmune diseases or vitamin deficiencies, or there's a ton of like long COVID. There's a ton of things that small fiber will show up kind of as a comorbidity too. But it was my first thing that I had. So in I had a couple skin issues. Like I have seborrheic dermatitis, which I was diagnosed with back in 2016, I think, back in grad school. But I didn't start having like other issues until January of 2019. I started having severe nerve pain all the time. And just that kind of went on for about, I had nerve pain like in my legs really badly. It just kind of felt like I was being like shocked, or like I had like a current going through my legs a lot, but it didn't really impact like my motor skills. So it was very strange. Like they didn't really know what was going on because I could walk, but I was in pain. But I could still walk. So they were like, oh, we don't really know. So I kind of went through a big medical mystery tour, as I like to call it, where I spent like 3.5 years trying to figure out what was causing the nerve pain. Eventually, it kind of would wax and wane. Like there would be periods where it would get really bad, periods where it wouldn't be that bad. And then it kind of ended up having other symptoms of, if you have small fiber neuropathy, that it can kind of present in a lot of different ways. So you can have pain, you can have like a lot of dysautonomia type symptoms where your temperature regulation is bad, or you've got like pins and needles, or you have like stomach problems. Like it can kind of, but for be in a lot of ways, but for me, it was mostly like nerve pain and then like temperature regulation problems. So I kind of dealt with that. I finally started getting more symptoms, like late 2021 through 2022, which I now know those were psoriatic arthritis symptoms, but I thought I thought that my mystery nerve pain was getting worse, right? So I kind of, I had put down going through the doctor's circuit, because I spent like 2 years trying to figure it out. We didn't really get anywhere, so I put it down for a while. And then when I started having like enthesitis and that type of thing, I kind of picked it back up, because I was like, this is making everything so hard. Like my mobility's getting changed. Like, this is not good. I need to figure out what this nerve pain is finally. So then on the way there, I got my neurologist figured out what that was finally, but he said, a lot of your other symptoms don't really go with that. So half of your symptoms go with your neuropathy. And I had a positive punch biopsy test. So I did have the neuropathy, but he's like, but I don't understand why you feel like you have tendinitis all the time. And I don't know why you're having joint pains. Like, I think you need to go to rheumatology. So then I kind of spent the next little while dealing with that. I went through like 2 rheumatologists before I found one that, would take me seriously at my age. Cause I think I was 29 at the time, and I didn't have, I did not look sick enough.
Yeah,
So
common story.
yeah, I kind of went through that trying to figure out what was going on. They kept telling me nothing was wrong. I would go to like doctor after doctor. My neurologist at some point, when the first rheumatologist sent me back and said, there's nothing wrong with you, you're fine, don't come back unless you like get psoriasis, which I did have psoriasis. He just didn't. Like, I have psoriasis, but I don't really have a lot of plaque psoriasis. So he should have been able to recognize it, but he didn't.
Don't get me started on people judging whether you've got psoriasis or not by your skin body coverage, because that's a whole can of worms I'm very vocal about, should we say.
Right. So he's basically, and like, this is direct quote from him. He said, you don't have psoriasis. Don't come back unless you have psoriasis or like your joints are deformed. Like, he was the type of really old school doctor that he wouldn't proactively treat people. He would only treat people once you already started having like major damage. And I'm like, and I remember even at the time thinking like, isn't the point so that we prevent the joint deformities, like to get ahead of that? But so he basically was like, your joints aren't deformed. You don't have psoriasis. Get out. Don't come back. And so I went back to my neurologist, and he was furious. And he was like, well, you have something going on. So if he won't run the blood work, because he didn't really want to do the other doctor didn't want to do a lot of blood work. He ran like C-reactive protein and maybe one or 2 other ones, and was like, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. And so I went back to my neurologist. He decided he was going to do all the rheumatology blood work himself. So he put in all the orders for everything he could think of. Everything came back normal, but he was still adamant that it was something rheumatological. But, the way that some clinics work, you can't switch doctors within a practice unless that doctor discharges you. So it was kind of a thing. We had to wait a while before he could push for me to go to see a different doctor in the group of rheumatology. And so it kind of got to the point over like that was like July or summer of like 2022. And it got to like November, and I couldn't walk anymore because my enthesitis and my ankles was so bad. And my body was basically just like destroying itself at that point. Like, I had, pain was constantly moving around. I didn't know what was going on. It would be like I had bursitis in a joint, and then I didn't. And then, and if you have enthesitis, there's so many spots in your body where you can get enthesitis. Yeah. So I was largely presenting as enthesitis, and most doctors didn't know what that was. Like, they were just like, oh, you have tendinitis, go to physical therapy. And I had been in physical therapy for about like 5-ish years. I've been in PT on and off. And my physical therapist was like, this is not normal. You shouldn't be having like this much tendinitis. Like, this has got to be systemic. I also think you need to go back to rheumatology. So they kind of jointly like tag teamed for me to get back in to rheumatology, I had to, but I was on like a 4-month wait list at that point to get back for a second opinion. And in the meantime, I got COVID for the first time,
Mhm.
and I got like really, really sick. And I had active COVID for like a month, which apparently doesn't really happen. Like most
No, no.
people are. So I was like heavily like symptomatic and testing positive for like a month. Like
Wow.
it was maybe like 27 days, something like that. It was like a month. And during that time, I got worse. I had like more symptoms. Like I started having costochondritis and like so, but we didn't at the time, we were like unsure of is some of this like potentially like long COVID or what? Because at the time I didn't have a diagnosis yet and I didn't know what we were dealing with. So by the time, that few months had passed, I had had that really bad experience with COVID. And then I got into my rheumatologist. We had to kind of at that point distinguish which symptoms were coming from what condition. So,
It's a lot to unpack, isn't it?
I knew what to attribute to my neuropathy. And then, like, I also have like migraines and rosacea, and I get some bouts of what we think is trigeminal neuralgia. So I had a lot of other stuff that I could kind of categorize symptoms a little bit better. But then I thought, I was unsure. We thought it was something rheumatological. I kind of thought it was going to be mixed connective tissue disease because
Right.
I seem to fit with some RA stuff, but not totally. But then, because I had been actively told numerous times I did not have psoriasis, even though I
Yeah.
did, that they were ruling that one out. So I wasn't even really looking into it. And then when I got to my rheumatologist, my current rheumatologist, he said, okay, he, spent about an hour with me, which is really unheard of for doctors, but he spent about an hour with me, at least in the States. I mean, we don't get long appointment times. I'm sure that's the same in a lot of other
Like
places. You get
7
like,
minutes, 7 or 8
yeah.
minutes there, yeah.
So, but his intro appointments would be like blocked at like an hour. So he could really dig back into all your prior
I love
symptoms, your
that.
tests, your family history. And so, we spent that time together. And at the end, he said, so I think you have two things going on, in addition to your neuropathy. He said, one, you're hypermobile, which I did know.
Right.
He's like, that's probably causing a lot of some of the issues. But he said, but also, I'm pretty sure you have a form of spondyloarthritis.
Mhm.
But he said, I'm not 100% sure if it's going to be ankylosing spondylitis or if it's going to be psoriatic arthritis. He's like, he was looking, I have scalp psoriasis. So he was looking at my hair, he was looking at my nails, and my nails were like destroyed. And he's, was looking at some of the I have a couple patches on like my elbows and my knees. And he was
Yeah.
like, I'm pretty sure this is psoriasis, but I want to give it a couple months. I want to see how you respond to some of the meds we try. And I want you to go back to dermatology and kind of see what they think about these spots. Cause he's like, to me, I'm thinking this is psoriasis. I think this is going to be psoriatic arthritis, but he's like, I don't want to label you until, we get a little ways down and see which path it's going.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like been the bulk of my journey. You see, now I'm dealing with like my third medical mystery tour of like, I started having
You need
like,
a break by this point.
I do. I'm very tired. I think I started having like, it's not exactly swallowing problems, but it is sort of swallowing problems. Like my esophagus, like kind of in the middle of my chest, like solid food does not want to go down. Like it just
Mhm.
sits there. And so that started happening around Memorial Day, which was in May of this year. And so I've kind of been through the gamut of that, of trying to figure out, is that a complication of a condition I already have? Is that something new? We thought it was going to be eosinophilic esophagitis. And so I've spent like the whole summer going through all the GI testing. And then now they're like, well, everything looks fine in your esophagus. So we are going to punt you back to neurology. And my neurologist, did a couple things, but he was like, I think this is rheumatological. So then now I'm getting kind of punted back to my rheumatologist to figure this out in the next couple months. So because I haven't really been able to eat like solid food in about like 5 months. So I've been like subsisting off of like protein shakes and like
How are you still smiling about all of this?
I I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, the one thing I mean, I can't eat cake because cake is soft. So, like,
Oh, okay,
so I
yeah,
kind of
small wins.
so I can still eat cake. So now it's just kind of like, we're doing some additional blood work, and I'm kind of suspecting that some of what's going on that's new might be Sjogren's also
Okay.
joining the party. But
Mhm.
I think it's just been it's been a very complicated summer of like trying to figure out where do these symptoms go, and like how do we match them. And but I recognize too that we were in the same spot when I was trying to get my arthritis diagnosed. So it's just kind of been one ailment after another. And I was 25 when all of this really started, and now I'm 31. So it's been a long couple of years.
Yeah.
But I have learned a lot, I guess, to put it briefly. I've learned a lot, especially about all that I know so much about all these conditions, even the ones I didn't end up having, because I would just get in there and like try to research and learn as much as I could
Yeah.
because I wanted to be as helpful as possible and like trying to find the answer.
Having a level of control as well, isn't it? Well, I
Yeah,
find anyway,
for
because, like,
sure.
if you've got a little bit of insight, then maybe you can find hope in it all, or I don't know, when it's so unpredictable.
Yeah, or to even say if I can learn a little bit, maybe I'll catch something before it gets too bad, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm always thinking like if they had caught my arthritis a little earlier, would it have gotten to the point where my enthesitis has been so bad that I like still can't really significantly do a lot of walking? Like I've been, my goal is to be able to walk a mile. And like I'm
Yeah.
still, I've been dealing with trying medications for the past 2 years, trying to find something that works for me. And we just haven't really gotten to that lucky treatment yet, which I'm hopeful that we will. But if for someone who was extremely active before, it's kind of hard to all of a sudden like have everything you like to do taken away from you.
I can relate to that.
Your social outlets too. Like I was
Mm.
kind of trying to make friends in some of those areas, like runner groups and stuff. And like that, it all just kind of drops off when you can't participate anymore. So I'm like very committed to trying to get back as much as like mobility as I can. Even though recognizing that there are going to be things that I'm just going to always have to deal with. But what can I gain from this? Like what is lost? What can I not do anymore? And I just need to like accept that and like move on. And what can I get back? Or what
Yeah.
can I get back, but maybe in a slightly different way than I was doing it before.
And nobody talks about that grief. Like, half the reason I do all of this stuff is because nobody was asking me about the grief side of losing all my social life, and you know what I mean. That side of things, it just doesn't get covered. No doctor's asking you about your friends, and if you're an active person like I was, sounds like you were too. Your social life is all that, isn't it? Like it revolves around doing them physical activities, and that's all your sort of join your connection to those people is. So when that goes, you're kind of very isolated, aren't you?
Right. And then two, for me, and I don't know, you probably can't tell, and I'm very much an introvert. Like one on one, I will talk your head off, but most of the time I'm like, in groups and whatever, I'm kind of in the background. And so for me, like being able to go run, that was like a mental health
Yeah.
benefit for me, but that was also like that kind of zen me time. Like I'm just out there in nature and I'm running, and I don't need to be with a big group or anything. Or if I am with a group, then we're just running together. Like there's like kind of like a sense of community, even if you're not like being social in the way that you would, think. So for me, I lost like some social stuff. I lost, kind of that way that I was getting like stress relief and like me time. And it was just kind of like, I didn't really have a lot of friends just in general. Like most of my friends from college were out of state. They,
Mhm.
have moved away, or maybe, over the pandemic, people don't really keep in touch as well. So you kind of don't really talk to folks on a daily basis. So, it was like for me, needing a social outlet was not something that is probably as crucial for me as it is to folks who are a lot more extroverted. But even introverts still need to be social, and that's something people don't really talk about either. Like,
No.
that even that little bit of community, sometimes you really do need that. Otherwise, you're just kind of getting cabin fever at your house.
Can I just say, I feel so seen just listening to you talk. Like, I might need to get you on like regularly or something. So just, and obviously this is about you, not about me, but just so to show you that this is so common. I reported psoriasis from childhood, and nobody paid any attention till I was covered in it in my mid-20s. I too was told I had ankylosing spondylitis, only for that to change to psoriatic arthritis in my 20s. I too, no word of a lie, my wife could back this up, in January 2019, developed pins and needles, issues with hot and cold sensations, undiagnosed neural issues that went on for 3 or 4 years. I too felt very isolated and everything, and from all the physical stuff I used to do. And just the cherry on the cake, you're talking about enthesitis and things like that. I've been told since last November, so nearly a year now at the time of recording, that I've got plantar fasciitis in my foot, and I'm almost certain it's ascites, and I've got an injection and scan for that later this month. So hearing you just rattle all this stuff off, I'm thinking it's too coincidental. It must be such a common theme with all of the overlapping and the being dismissed because of age and not presenting with enough rashes, and all those similarities that we have is really it's scary. Like, I'm sitting here listening to this thinking this must be really common if you and I share so many similarities.
Yeah, and it is. And I think the hard thing about psoriatic arthritis is because it can present so differently. Like, and I obviously I'm not a doctor. I could be off the mark on this, but it's from what I know of RA tends to follow very similar patterns for the
Yes.
most part.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
bilateral, it's joints. You're going to see
Yeah.
a lot of swelling. But folks in PSA, we have so many symptoms that can all present in different percentages, right? Like, I am what, like, my doctor likes to call me polyenthesitis because I have so much enthesitis. Like, but compared to like I don't really get a lot of joint swelling. Like, I get
Me neither.
stiff joints, I get painful joints, but the amount of painful joint episodes I have compared to my enthesitis is way less. And then, if you don't, I have inverse psoriasis, I have nail psoriasis, I
Yep.
have scalp psoriasis. Like, I have all the ones that are a lot more hidden.
And that nobody seems to want to use to get a diagnosis. Like, I've been reporting inverse psoriasis since I was a teenager, but no one associated that to my pain. And I don't know about you, you maybe hinted at it earlier. Mine does not show in blood tests at all.
No,
So that
not at
delayed
all.
diagnosis for so long. And even to this day, I will go see my rheumatologist, and the first thing they said is, "Well, your bloods look good." They've looked good for like 30 years. Stop telling me my bloods are good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like, and they'll be like, well, your blood work looks good. And I'm like, well, but I can't walk.
Yeah.
So I don't really think it matters. But
Yeah.
I think the nice thing about my doctor now is that he really does understand that, like, for psoriatic arthritis, like, it doesn't really matter what your blood work says most of the time.
That's amazing.
Now,
Yeah.
I did finally, in some of the blood work we're doing to see about Sjogren's, he's having me redo a lot of the blood work that I originally did like 2 or 3 years ago. And I had a positive ANA this time for the first time in the
Okay.
entire time. Like, you can see on, like, in the portal, all your past blood work to like compare against. And it was negative, negative, negative. And now it's like positive. And I'm like,
Okay.
so sometimes stuff will show up later, or when it does show up, it might mean that you're getting a comorbid condition that
Yeah.
shows up a little bit easier. So, but I think too, there's just so many ways PSA can present. And so we don't following like a textbook of someone with extreme plaque psoriasis and like a swollen knee might not always be, like, the swelling I get is in my toes.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. So yeah, well, I'll get swelling in my toes, occasionally in my fingers, but mostly in my toes. But my knee and my back or my hips could be agony, my neck, for example, and there's nothing. You can do an MRI on it. There's nothing to show for it, at all.
Nothing at all. And that's the other thing too, is like, well, when your tendons are so inflamed, like, I think they can check that with an ultrasound, but you have to convince them to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, they're much more, they want to do the x-rays. And I'm like, you're not going to see anything on the x-ray. We
No,
just need to
yeah. This has come
get the
up on the show
ultrasound. Like,
before to try and educate patients because people don't realize, X-ray is going to show the damage that's already done. It's not going to show the active inflammation, but it's such an old, and I'm not medically trained. I don't claim to be. I have lots of friends that are doctors. It's not doctor bashing, but it's just that there is that certain way of thinking where as soon as you present with, oh, my knee hurts or my foot hurts, it's like, oh, we'll get an x-ray. And I already know that's going to show nothing because I've got very few areas of my body that do have the historic damage because I've been on biologics and things for so long.
right. Oh, and even with orthopedic injuries, I mean, probably half of those are tendon and ligaments, which also aren't going to show up on an x-ray. But I feel like I think x-ray is cheaper, at least in the States. So
that
that's the
would
go-to.
explain it, I suppose.
It's That tends to be the go-to. But yeah, I think a lot of us have very similar stories, and it just kind of, you don't know that until you start hearing them.
Yeah. Well, no, I must admit, like I say, and I shouldn't be talking about myself, but it's like, I've been waiting a year with this. My foot is in agony. And as much as I'm looking forward to having a needle put in the sole of my foot, like I would getting a hole in the head. So at least I'm just praying that because I'm finally getting a scan on it, if they can confirm it's not just a running injury from somebody that doesn't run, if it is exercise or something like that, then it explains so many other areas. But it's just, you shouldn't need that non-specialist because it hasn't happened. I don't know about yourself, but this wouldn't be the first time that a regular clinician doing a scan has discovered something. So I had it basically. My AS went from AS to PSA because of an ultrasound. A guy doing a scan and was saying, "Well, that's wrong," and I find that so frustrating. And it sounds like with you're amazing. You've got a brilliant rheumatologist now, but doesn't that just show you how important it is to get the right specialist who sees the person and listens to what they're saying?
Yeah. And for enthesitis, if anyone is listening, I would absolutely recommend ice. Don't put heat on it, put ice on it. Ice will kind of numb it so that you
Mhm.
can't feel it for a little while. It doesn't long term make it feel better, but like in a pinch, if you just need some relief, ice will help. I know, because like my first enthesitis was in my ankles and the bottoms of my feet. So,
Mhm. I'm being selfish now. Did yours burn like a hot poker in it?
oh yes,
Yeah.
it burns, and that's part of the reason it took me so long to get diagnosed is because neuropathy also burns.
Yeah.
So when I started having the burning in my ankle tendons, for me, it started in my posterior tibial tendons, not the Achilles, which was the other tricky thing. The Achilles tends to be the hallmark for PSA, but I have it in other ankle tendons. And they would say, well, you're not injured. So it's probably just your neuropathy. So they would say, it's just your neuropathy. It's just your neuropathy because it burns. And I'm like, well, it feels like I'm like literally on fire. So can we do something about it? And they were like, just ice it. And the ice, well, they were telling me that to kind of, because they didn't know what it was, but ice does tend to help more than heat. But also something else I have learned from talking with other people with PSA is if your enthesitis is flaring that bad, then it means a lot of times it means your treatment's not working anymore and it's time to switch meds, which is not anything people want to hear. You don't want to
No.
hear, I need to switch meds again.
Yeah, I, I I was smiling during that because I'm pretty sure, Angela, you've just diagnosed an issue I've had since 2019. So thank you for that. There'll be like a thank you letter in the post when that all gets confirmed, because it just, like I say, the burn, and I've been reporting this for so long, and like I say, it took meeting people like yourself, hearing other people's stories on this show and in the community, for me to even know that was connected to PSA. Like how can I have lived with something since I was 12 years old? And my conversations about what it is and the education around it. And that's why we've got a huge problem in the UK at the minute with the way that appointments are changing, because the burden is being put back on the patient to know when to put their hand up and ask for help. And my argument is, well, if no one's actually given people that proper education when they're diagnosed, if it's just like, oh, you've got this label, take this, then how do we know when to ask for help? Because I'm sitting here with 3 or 4 issues that are worse than my PSA, and for all I know, they're one and the same, but I'm not educated to join the dots or to know when to ask for help.
Right. And that's similar here. Like I know at least where I live, we have a shortage of rheumatologists in Louisiana. So everyone comes to New Orleans or where I live in Baton Rouge, that's kind of, you come from all over the state. So it's very hard to get to them, without like months wait time. And, you get diagnosed, but there's like, nope, they don't give you a pamphlet or anything. Like the doctors, they're so busy. Like they spent the time with you, and that's pretty much all you can kind of get. So right from there, you have to educate yourself, which has been something, I mean, I was an original little Wikipedia nerd in middle school. I was constantly, I have a history degree for undergrad, so I was constantly researching and looking things up and trying to learn. So, I'm definitely the type of person that you tell me I have something, I'm immediately Dr. Google, and I'm on it. I'm going to learn as much as I can about it. And, I'm going to watch all the podcasts. I'm going to watch all the videos but, that's a lot of a burden to put on a patient when they're trying to just exist to do daily life things, right? Like someone told me recently, they're like, well, you should go back to school and be a doctor because you know so much. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not good at actual science. That's why I was a humanities major. But the second time, it's just kind of like, that's just such a heavy burden for the patient. Like, not only do you have to live with the symptoms, you have to do everything else that your life is requiring, your kids, your job, your family, whatever. But then it's like, you have to deal with the treatment. You have to keep on keep up with everything. And then to have to be in charge of going and educating yourself about the disease. It's just kind of a lot, and I think too, though, if you do have the disease, for your own sake, you should learn about it if you can. But I wish there was more of like a joint education.
We need to set people up so they're not just failing and flailing around in the dark, and it shouldn't be. People tell us not to use Dr. Google. Like the amount of conversations I've had with medical professionals where they say, oh, don't Google it. Well, I have 7 minutes with you to tell you about how the last 12 months have been hell. We haven't got time for you to educate me in my own condition, and I've been living with it for 20 years. And that's the problem, and so many times it's come up in chat as we're talking for people that are watching this live. So many times I've heard that word just, so you will say, I'm having this issue. Oh, it's just this, or it's just that. And so then you feel like you shouldn't have said anything. And I think you used the word burden. That's so key, because we've already talked about social isolation. We've probably touched somewhere along the line about like mental health side of it. So you're trying to join the dots, like in your case, what sits in what bucket and what's PSA and what's not. So the fact that we're just, I'll take this and sending people off into the wild and then expecting them to know when to come back and ask for help when something changes, just, it feels like a big ask, doesn't it?
It does. And then too, it's just like, you know that you only have limited time with your doctor. So then it's like, okay, if I have a list of 20 things I need to ask them about, what is my top 3 or my top 4? And like, but then that going in, a lot of times they have their own agenda of what they need to talk to you about. They need to ask you about this joint or that joint or whatever. And you're like, but no, I have to tell you about this. This is new. Like I have like a running list on my phone because I see my rheumatologist in a couple weeks, and I've got like a list on my phone of like all the things that I need to talk to him about. And like, it's like, not only do I need to talk to him about my PSA, but I also need to get him to weigh in on this swallowing thing. So I'm like trying to prioritize, like, how do we approach it? But then I know that when we get in the appointment, he also has stuff he needs to check for me because we're checking on like my antibodies for my meds. So he's going to want to talk about that first. And I'm going to be like, wait, that can wait. Let's talk about this other thing. But, we don't always have the same priorities for the appointment, even though, at the end of the day, we ultimately are a team. At least for my rheumatologist, we're a team. And so if I'm not comfortable with something, he's like, okay, we're not going to do it. But I know a lot of people don't have that same type of experience.
No. Yeah, no, hold on to that and treasure it. I was going to ask you.
It's like, please don't leave. I tell him all the time, I'm like, do not retire. You cannot leave me. There is no one else.
If you move, I will follow. But I was going to ask you, I think you touched upon it a little bit earlier, but in terms of like that experience, because one of the things that come up a lot with psoriatic arthritis, because it straddles rheumatology and dermatology, I think a lot of people's early experiences are determined by the fact, did you get put under rheumatology first or did you get put under dermatology first? So like, I know that nobody paid any attention to my skin because I was predominantly under rheumatology. And when I did see dermatology, it was just a fleeting thing. What was your experience of like, because it is a condition that does straddle sort of multiple specialisms?
So had, I had I've always I do my, at least this is how we do it in the States. I don't know if this is how they do it everywhere, but we have, your insurance typically will cover like an annual checkup with like
Hmm.
your primary care doctor or your GP. If you're a lady, your OBGYN. But also a lot of times you can get annual checkups for your dermatology and kind of some of those other fields too if you have a history of stuff in that field. And since I had seborrheic dermatitis already, I was already seeing a dermatologist yearly. And I ended up, my old dermatologist left, I had a new one, and she saw me in 2020, 2021, 2022 as I was developing the psoriasis. And she was kind of suspicious of it. She looked, she was kind of like, your scalp is like wildly out of control. I'm pretty sure that might be more than just subderm, and she looked at my nails, and she, with like the nail psoriasis, a lot of times it can be mistaken for like a fungal infection. So she
Yeah.
tested it for like a fungal infection. And I think, but because that appointment is only annual, by the time I got back around to her to when I started really showing a lot of the joint and the other symptoms, I think I had already seen rheumatology. So when I went in and said, "Hey, he thinks I have PSA," she was like, "Great, because I've been suspecting you had psoriasis." But she's like, the biopsies and all that for psoriasis can be like kind of invasive, or like they come back inconclusive. So she didn't really want to start hole punching me for biopsies if she didn't need to. I think,
Yeah.
I think she knew, she was hoping I would just see rheumatology, and then and he would give her the green light to a little bit more aggressively treat, because they're like they're in the same clinic across the hall from each other. So those two
That's how it
doctors
should
actually,
be. Yeah.
they know each other very well. So she was like, "Yeah, I was hoping that's what he would say, because that's what I was thinking too, but I didn't want to step on." I don't think she wanted to step on his toes and diagnose me with PSA, but I think she kind of suspected that that's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fungal test ones always make me laugh, because if you've got inverse psoriasis or nail psoriasis, often a flare will turn into a fungal thing because of the broken skin, and then they do them tests and, oh yeah, it's fungal. Well, I was told I had fungal infection for years. Well, that was just a byproduct of having inverse psoriasis, or yeah, that sort of thing, isn't it?
Right.
I'm very conscious. This has been amazing. Like, considering you were a last minute stand in for like 5 days' notice to join us, Angela, this has been a massive therapy session for me. And I've just seen the time and realised we haven't even talked about volunteering. So, thank you so much for sharing so
Yeah,
much. I just want
anytime.
to give you the. I'm tempted to be cheeky and say, can you come back next week? But
I mean, I will. I have a lot of free time. I will come back whenever you want.
like, because I feel like we could either talk about volunteering now, or we could just give it its own space if that's something you
Yeah,
wanted
that's
to do.
fine.
Like,
Yeah, we could do that. I will chat about arthritis and health related things till I'm blue in the face. So I will absolutely come back.
let's do that then, because I feel like you obviously do a lot of work with volunteering. I want to find out, how you got into that and how it helps you as well as others, and all this sort of thing. So anyone that tuned in live to watch a World Arthritis Day and volunteering show, I'm sorry that we've gone right down a PSA rabbit hole, but there's been so many similarities, and yeah, this has really helped me, Angela. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you'd come back, and hopefully you're not too offended that I haven't given you the stage for the topics
Mm.
we were going to talk about.
Oh no.
Okay, brilliant. I know you don't do loads on social media in terms of anything like that, but is there anywhere you want to plug, or where people can maybe we could just talk a little bit about those who do volunteer, and if they can support anyone who's been listening who might have some of the conditions we're talked about?
Yeah. So I think this will be a little intro volunteer. So in the States, we have the Arthritis Foundation, which I have been volunteering with for this year. But they also, it's called the Arthritis Foundation, but they house groups for a lot of rheumatological conditions. Like they have stuff for PSA, RA, AS. They even have stuff for EDS and like JRA kids. And so they have really wide network of resources and support that they do in the States. But I do know the National Psoriasis Foundation also does some stuff in the States more geared towards psoriasis
Yeah.
itself. And then other ones I know of that I'm sure you guys know of too. Creaky Joints does a lot globally for different conditions. Versus Arthritis, I think, is in the UK.
Yeah.
Like what I will encourage anyone to do is if you have any kind of condition, arthritis, small fiber neuropathy, whatever, anything at all, there is probably some foundation or some group out there that can provide you some sort of resources or at least just like community support. So I'm going to tell you to put your Dr. Google hat on and get on the internet and Google because, like, we feel so isolated, right? Like we're on immunosuppressants. We have lost mobility. Maybe our friends that we did those things with don't stay our friends when we can't participate anymore. Like your family can only do so much, right? Like our families are great. Hopefully we love them. They support us. Let's hope. I'm not going to speak for everyone. I know not everybody has a supportive family, but but your family can't be your only support. Your spouse can't be your only support. We have to have like community in some way. So I really encourage people to find a community, whether that's on, Instagram also has a lot of chronic illness people. I know that's how I learned about you is because I found you on Instagram.
Ranting away.
Like there's a few other people that I follow that were kind of helpful for me in, finding a community. Like, I think you interviewed Allie a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
She's great. She
Gosh,
posts a lot of
amazing.
stuff,
So much
like
energy.
so much energy. And I'm just like, okay, well, she's making comedic.
Yeah, I love how everybody puts their own little spin on it. You know what I mean? I tend to do like the serious, candid stuff, and then you've got her doing this amazing way of reaching people who maybe wouldn't tune in. They're absolutely not going to tune in and listen to serious conversations about lived experience. But watching someone like Ali do what she does, can switch people on, can't it, and get the support they need.
Right. So that's what I'm encourage people to do is like even there's Facebook groups, there's Instagram. Like if you don't have social media, the Psoriatic Arthritis Reddit group is super active. Those people have taught me so much. I am always on there. Like
I've been told about this Reddit. I haven't gone on that. Like Reddit is something I haven't used in a lot of years. There were some changes on Reddit, and whatever reason, I moved away and went over to sort of Discord and places like that. So I need to check that out because you're the second person this week who's told me about the psoriatic arthritis Reddit community.
There's so many people on there that are just being able to crowdsource all the experiences. I think was helpful for me, like navigating that initial like post-diagnosis phase because they kind of they kind of say here's your diagnosis and then they drop you with the meds and you're just kind of like what do I do, what can I do, what can I hope for? And I think you see a wide variety of people with really mild PSA to people with more moderate to severe.
Yeah.
And for me, it's helpful to see the people that are thriving, but it's also helpful to see the people that are not thriving because, a lot of the past 2 years I have been there. So I can identify with that.
Yeah. And it's so nice when you're willing to go back and like that cyclical thing of it. Like it's one of the reasons I do it. It's like, because I remember where I was in 2019 and how horrendous that was and how I nearly lost everything. So I try to always remind myself, even now, if I'm doing okay, and I'm fortunate I've now got a platform and everything else to try and make like these spaces where people can share who are not doing okay. Because like you say, it's really important that we sort of pass on that, those experiences and those knowledge that we unfortunately gained in very dark times, isn't it? So thank you as well for doing that for the community because not everybody does. Some people go skipping off into the sunset thinking, well, I'm fixed now.
I think if you are in that space, like, and I know remission is like a hot topic for people. From what I have seen, it seems like RA folks tend to have medicated remission be a little bit more achievable than a lot of us do in the PSA world. But, so I know we hope for that, but then also, something, if I ever did achieve that, I would hope that I wouldn't forget how it felt to not be that way. Just, because you can support people so much.
Yeah.
just saying, hey, I know what you're going through. Like, yes, I have enthesitis. Yeah, my toes are swollen. Yeah, my scalp is flaky, and all of it really sucks. But you know what? I get you. I understand what you're dealing with.
Yeah. And if I've learned anything with psoriatic arthritis, you won't stay well managed for long. I did that. I was in that place where I was playing rugby and starting a family, and then it all came crashing down. And I kicked myself for not having a plan B, and I will never let myself be in that position again. I will always have a plan B for the remission Joel and the flare and Joel, because it took a long while to rebuild, just because I thought that was it. I've achieved success. The fairy tale is done. And then, I found out the hard way. It doesn't last.
It's hard to live between two worlds like that. Like, I'm sick world, and I'm still technically sick, but not currently world. It's straddling that line there.
Yeah. Angela, I'm sorry I've kept you a little bit longer than promised. You've been absolutely brilliant. We never got around to volunteering. So I'm not going to ask you to commit to an exact date now, but I'll just say for anyone watching this live, Angela will be back very, very shortly, and we'll talk about volunteering. Is that a deal?
Deal.
Superb. Is there anything else you want I think you've probably shared all your links and everything, but is there any social media handles or anything like that you want to share of your own?
I mean, my Instagram is pretty private. It's mostly like me and my dog. But I mean, if you want to follow me, let me see. I think I'm A_SCHIRO. I think it's been so long that I've looked at that I've actually registered what it is, but that's me. If you want to, but my DMs are always open. If you want to talk about arthritis, or you want to talk about neuropathy, or, you have questions about anything, like I'm always happy to chat.
Thank you so much. This has been brilliant. Like, just for me personally, I'm sorry for anyone at home watching this thinking, well, I was expecting volunteer and Joel's just used it as a therapy session. But if it's helped me, I'm hoping it's helped other people as well. And we've got World Psoriasis Day coming up. We've had World Arthritis Day yesterday. It felt a very relevant topic. So, Angela, I will see you back on the show very shortly. I'm really sorry to have made you commit to that live on air.
No, I'm happy to do it. Like I said, I will talk your ear off about arthritis all day.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, and so super easy and casual. I've just really enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon where you are, and I look forward to speaking to you again shortly.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.